Let's use one technique to create two completely different cards, all at the same time. Let's get crafting. So I'm starting out with some Distress Oxide inks. I'm going to be using Wilted Violet, Picked Raspberry, and Prize Ribbon, along with some clear embossing powder, Versamark, and a stencil. Any stencil you have will work. Now I'm just going to flip this over and tape my stencil to my cardstock. I am using regular Recollections cardstock, but of course I forgot to use the anti-static bag, so I went back to do that first, and then I'm going to flip it back over and attach some tape to it so it doesn't move around. I've chosen to use some washi tape, which isn't typically my normal tape to use, but I wanted something a little stickier than my mint tape here because I really wanted it to stick down. I gave it a pretty good coating of Versamark, and then I set that one aside and flipped over my design and applied it to a second piece of cardstock that was already prepped with washi tape as well. So the second design varies a little bit because I'm going to put it through my Platinum 6 die cutting machine. And I'm not using cutting plates or magic mats. I'm using the rubber mat to emboss on. And I'm going to go ahead and put that through my die cutting machine so I get embedded into the cardstock the Versamark that remains on the top of that design. With both pieces of cardstock complete with their Versamark, I'm going to go ahead and use my clear embossing powder. Now you could use white if you had it, but since the cardstock's white, it's really not necessary. I just want to create a place where my ink is not going to go. Wherever the embossing powder is what's going to resist the ink. So it's going to stay the same color as whatever is underneath it, and in this case, white cardstock, so it will stay white. So I'm just tapping off the excess embossing powder, and then I just use a piece of copy paper. I find that's easiest for me. I just tip it back into the embossing powder container, and I'm ready for the second piece of cardstock. Hey y'all, I'm Wendy from Village Card and Craft, and I want to thank you for choosing to spend your time with me today. If you're finding value or enjoyment from my video, I would sincerely appreciate a thumbs up and hitting the subscribe button. We'd love to have you be a part of the Village Card and Craft community. You can also join us over on Facebook, where you can share what you're making with the rest of the group. We'd love to see you there. With my Wow Heat Embossing Gun all heated up for about 30 seconds on option number 2, that is the melt setting. I'm going to go ahead and melt all of the embossing powder on both pieces of cardstock. Now, there's just nothing better than getting that reaction. I love to watch this stuff melt, gotta tell you. For my A2 size cardstock that has embossing powder on it, I typically hold that up and away from the surface. Tim Holtz has explained that allowing the heat to go through the card will melt that embossing powder faster than leaving it lying on a surface because your surface would also have to heat up. With the embossing powder all melted, we're going to go to ink blending, one of my favorite things to do. So I have chosen from my ink blending book Picked Raspberry, Prize Ribbon, and Wilted Violet. And I'm going to start with my Picked Raspberry, and I'm just using some ink blending brushes, and I'm going to go ahead and figure out about 1/3 of my card is going to be covered with the pink. Now I do have a heavy hand when it comes to color. I like brighten in your face. If you want this to be a little more subtle, a little more pastel, just move your hand down to your blending brush so you don't have as much pressure on the head of the brush. Next, I'm going to be moving on to Prize Ribbon. Now, I do start my ink blending just slightly off the edge of the card so that I keep from having a harsh line on the card, and I'm really not crossing over into the pink yet. I'm just trying to lay that color down till I get the proper vibrancy that I'm looking for. And then I'll start moving it up into the pink, and then I'll use the pink brush to move the pink back down into the blue. The back and forth motion of the blue into the pink and the pink into the blue will create that softer blend that you're looking for so that you get a really pretty purple in between. When ink blending, I typically flip my cardstock around. I find it easier to work at the top. And then here I'm using a piece of paper towel. It could be a scrap paper, something to keep my fingers out of the wet ink as I start working with the wilted violet. Again, I start just slightly off of my cardstock on my glass mat and pull that ink upward towards the blue. Now that my wilted violet has met up with my prize ribbon, I'm going to once again go back and forth. I'm going to pull the blue into the purple and the purple into the blue, creating that softer blend. With a quick tidy up of my glass mat, I'm going to go ahead and make some magic with this card. I know it doesn't look like much, but just wait. All I'm using is a piece of paper towel, and I'm just going to rub it vigorously across the top of my cardstock. And I'm basically removing the ink that's sitting on top of the embossing powder. Remember, the embossing powder, you're only going to see through to the cardstock, so it's going to leave it white. And it just comes out so beautifully. If you find that you have lost some of the vibrancy that you were looking for, just go back with your ink blending brush and reapply the ink. Again, remember to wipe off your embossing powder because that ink is just sitting on top. I'm going to do the exact same process, same colors, same order for the second card. And I'm going to speed this up a little bit because it is identical, but uh, this one is amazing. I totally love this one. So keep watching. I have not found any stencil that this won't work with. However, many of you want to know exactly the products that are being used. This one is a VICKI BOUTIN stencil, which is great value. You get 3 in a package, and it's from the Fernwood collection. It's called Greenery Stencils Large Floral. It's time to put the cards together. So I'm using Accent Opaque's 120-pound cardstock for my bases, Recollections black cardstock, 65 pounds, and my top layer, the white cardstock, was also a Recollection 65-pound weight cardstock. I'm going to cut down my layers by 1/4 each. The bases are A2 size, so 5.5 by 4.25. And I'm cutting down this decorative panel to 3 3/4 inches by 5. To save time, I typically cut down all of my card bases ahead of time as well as layers in white. And any additional layers I'll cut down as needed. But the white layers are all the same size, and then I just trim the layers down to be whatever size I need them. But they are the 5.5 by 4.25 inch, just like the card bases. Alrighty, it's time to go ahead and glue my card panels down, and I am using my all-time favorite glue, Bearly Arts Precision Craft Glue. This stuff lasts so long. I was making hundreds of cards for my previous job at Christmas time, along with everything else that I've done, and I've only refilled that bottle once with the Bear it's a refill bottle for it, and I still have half of this bottle, so goodness knows it lasts forever. And I'm being very strategic here because I'm using my box of finger daubers to hold down my panel till the glue grips. I couldn't get my hands on one of my acrylic blocks apparently, but whatever you have works. By adding that black layer, it really makes the colors of the Distress Oxides pop. The white pops, the wilted violet, the prize ribbon, and the picked raspberry. It just makes it stand out with a wow factor. So now it's time to decide what sentiments I'm going to use. And I'm going to my binder system, which is a system of organization of my stamps and dies. And I will link that above if you haven't seen it and you're looking for a new way to organize your own supplies. This works great for me because it allows me to view in one place every single thing that I own and determine what I want and where it is. And it's easy to put back because it's all numbered. But here I'm just going through my sentiment section and deciding what kind of card it is I want to make. And then I'll go pull those items. With my selection made, I went to my racks and pulled out the sentiment that I've chosen. Now, this particular sentiment is new to me. I'm guessing it's probably about 20 plus years old, but I recently went to an estate sale and purchased a whole lot of product, and she had a ton of wood mounted stamps. I truly did not have room for those, so I converted them all to cling mount. So once again, if you haven't seen that video, I'll link that for you at the end. Because these are new to me, I'm not quite sure of the quality of the stamp, so I am using a stamp platform. This one is by Stampin' Up! And it was called Stamparatus. It has been discontinued, unfortunately, but if you have another stamp platform, go ahead and stamp your sentiment on the inside. If you don't have a stamping platform, acrylic blocks would do for you. Because these are former wood-mounted stamps, there is a foam element to the red rubber. In that case, there's no need to use the mouse pad in a stamping platform. That would be used for a clear stamp that doesn't have that additional foam. I am using a new dye ink. This one is Simon Hurley Create ink and it is called Midnight Snack. So this is the first Simon Hurley ink that I've purchased, but I was really looking for something that was kind of a navy blue, and I wasn't finding that in the Distress Oxide. So I thought I'd give this one a try. Speaking of ink, what is your favorite ink of choice? Now, I have just about the entire collection of Tim Holtz's Distress Oxide line, and then I have a few VersaFine Clairs, the one Simon Hurley, and some Distress ink as well. But the oxides are definitely my go-to. What's yours? Let me know in the comments below. I really liked this sentiment. It says, wishing you many happy moments of discovering new things in life. Have a wonderful birthday. I think that's really sweet. I used the same sentiment for the second card, but this time I stamped it in VersaFine Clair Charming Pink. For the outside sentiment, I am using Spellbinder's dies. This is Simply Perfect Mix and Match Sentiments, and I have die cut all of these out to a card so I can see exactly what they look like before I cut them out. I've cut out 3 happies and 3 birthdays, and I'm going to stack them on top of one another with Artist Tack. Now, if you've never used Artist Tack, it is loads of little micro dots that you can lift or put onto the back of your sentiment. And when you lift up your sentiment, they're all adhered, kind of like little mini glue dots. It sure eliminates the seepage from liquid glue as well as just the mess that liquid glue would cause on something so finely detailed. Artist Tack has been a real game changer for me. I definitely have a vision issue, and to not have to fiddle with such a fine detail with glue has made all the difference in the world when it comes to crafting. So I've skipped on ahead and all of my sentiments are stacked and ready to go on my card front. And I do use my Barely Arts liquid craft glue for this. I could use the micro dots, but it is 3 layers of cardstock thick, and I want to make sure that all of those layers are going to stay firmly planted on my card front. And for that, I cannot negate how wonderful Precision Craft Glue by Barely Arts is. It's just amazing stuff, and it is my absolute go-to. So I'm going to deal with the fiddly bits for this part, but it's well worth it in my estimation. So I'm going to finish dressing these cards up, and I'm going to share them with you in just a second. But in the meantime, I found my acrylic blocks. Do you struggle to figure out what colors go best when it comes to card making? Check out my Distress Ink Blend shorts. And I'll see you real soon.